All right, everybody joining us now on Setting the Pace. He is no stranger because he is a reoccurring guest. It's the one and only Keith Smith from Spotrac.com. Keith, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Absolutely. We are excited to talk to you because we know you've covered the Celtics for a very long time, and the Pacers and the Celtics are playing in the first in-season tournament quarterfinals game. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, these games have brought a little bit more juice to the regular season, but I'm curious, this matchup here, obviously, Boston dominated Indiana when Indiana visited them for their only time this season on the road. No Tyrese Haliburton, but it was just a brutal beating. So how do you think this game ends up shaking out a little bit?
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's going to go like that. That was probably a one-time thing. I think it's a lot of this is going to be, do the Celtics get caught up in playing the Pacers? No pun intended, but pace, right? They want to play fast. They want to race up and down the floor, turn this into a game where there's roughly 100 possessions, 100 shooting possessions, I should say. And Boston generally wants to play a little bit slower than that. So they have the talent to keep up, but that's not really their game. They're also going to be without Kristaps Porzingis. He's already been ruled out. So that's going to probably lessen things a little bit as far as turning this into just, yeah, we'll run up and down and have a shootout with you. So I think a big key is going to be whose pace is this more played like. Generally, that favors the faster paced team just in terms of who wants to play a little faster because it's just easier to get caught up in that. And there's things you can do to kind of juice the pace. But I think Boston will do what they can to try to control the possessions, try to get inside as much as they can, and do the things that have brought them some success this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Kristaps Porzingis. He's dealing with a calf issue. He's not expected to play. For the Pacers, we imagine Tyrese Haliburton will be out there. Still don't know about Jalen Smith. However, talk about what could be that impact defensively for the Celtics if Porzingis is not out there, which obviously he's not expected to be.
Yeah, it's a big loss closing down those driving lanes and making sure that they have that rim protection. He's done really well with that. Even if the block numbers aren't super duper high, he does a great job at altering shots and protecting the rim. A lot of times what you notice when he's out there, the Celtics do a good job of funneling guys to him, and then it changes the plan. They'll get into the paint and they get up, and then it's like, I don't really have this. Let me kick it out. And the Celtics are pretty good with Holiday and White and Tatum and Brown at being ball hawks. They're pretty good in their rotations of coming around and then picking up steals on those passes or getting deflections and those kind of things. So it changes things a little bit. Al Horford still does a great job. How I don't know at his age, but he is still playing great basketball. But it's just going to be a question of what happens when he comes out, right? Because then it's either going to be Luke Cornett or Nehemiah Queta, and when you get into those spots, that's just different, right? Those guys aren't as capable as Porzingis is. So you're probably going to look to, all right, let's make sure we maybe match their minutes. It sounds odd to do it this way, but maybe we match their minutes a little bit when Halliburton's not out there and the Pacers aren't quite as capable of breaking down the defense as easily and getting into the teeth of the team. Maybe you try to make sure Horford's out there a little bit more when those guys are out there, and you just kind of go forward with that. So that's the big thing. And then it just puts that much more emphasis on the guards and the perimeter guys to really try to lock up, not let those guys get past them, try to hold them in check as best they can.
Tyrese Haliburton had an incredible month of November, really special offensively. Obviously, Drew Holiday, Derek White, two of the best defenders in the league. There's going to be a lot of attention paid to him. How do you think Boston approaches trying to defend Tyrese in this game? And what ways can Tyrese kind of counter the defense that they bring towards him?
Yeah, I think you might see them pick him up a little higher. I think you see them bring the pickup points closer to half court just to disrupt things where you can. For him, if you pick him up too low, you're already kind of conceding a lot of ground to him because he's so good at getting downhill and getting to the paint, getting into his own stuff, finding kick out passes or drop off passes at the rim. I think the Pacers, it's been underrated. They have a lot of guys who are pretty good at diving to the rim, and they've really learned how to dive late because they know Haliburton will hold it for that extra beat. He loves that jump pass, right? It's something that we all like. Anybody who's played, your coach has told you, don't jump to pass, don't jump to pass. And he's made it a weapon for him. So, and guys have figured out, all right, he's going to do it. He's going to hold it for that extra beat. So if you can dive late or you could cut into open space, he's going to find you that way. So I think for Boston, you pick them up a little bit higher. They're going to switch. They tend to still switch everything, especially when Horford's out there, not Porzingis. So they'll switch quite a bit. The Pacers aren't an extremely pick and roll heavy team in a traditional sense, where Miles Turner's not a guy who rolls to the rim 70 times a game or anything like that. But they do set their fair share of screens. So they'll switch a lot of stuff there. Holiday and White will be the primary matchups, but they'll live with it if it's Tatum or Brown, or if they have to go into the backup guys. They'll make do as best they can. And sometimes what we've seen teams do, and that'll be a challenge for the Pacers, is if Peyton Pritchard or Sam Hauser are out there, sometimes teams take themselves out of their regular offense to try to attack those guys. And the Celtics really welcome that, because Hauser holds up pretty well. And Pritchard, unless you can really back him down and put him in the goal, he also tends to hold up well. So that's going to be a key for the Pacers is, hey, don't go out of what we do just to try to attack these guys, because that's kind of what Boston wants.
Now, Boston does so much so well. I mean, a really good team, a true contender. However, if there's a point of emphasis the Pacers can look to attack, maybe perhaps a weakness of Boston, what would you say that Boston could struggle at a little bit?
On offense, it's turnovers. They still tend to be really sloppy with the ball. And I think sometimes what the Pacers can do is, especially with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, blitz them off pick and rolls. And sometimes you send that helper from unconventional place. It's maybe a guy who's 2 passes away or 2 players away. You send him in the help with the other guy dropping back to cover, just because it still throws them off a little bit. Those 2 guys, even this deep into their career, they're still learning how to be primary on-ball creators. It's not something they've done a ton of. It's been more over the last couple of years, and it's definitely more this year, but that's still a work in progress. And then on the other end of the floor, I would say it's going to the offensive glass. I think, that's a little bit of a challenge. I know Indiana doesn't do a ton of crashing the glass, but they have guys who can do it, especially like Aaron Nesmith is very good at getting in there and keeping those balls alive. I think Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith, if they play, even if those 2 guys aren't the ones coming down with the rebound, they're pretty good at getting in there and keeping it alive with tip outs and those kind of things. And Boston at times can still be kind of a messy rebounding team. And then just stick with your offense. Keep moving the ball. If you keep moving the ball, the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, and surprisingly Drew Holiday have gotten caught ball watching a little bit this year. And that's where that opens up back cuts. And I think the Pacers have a lot of good passers on this team. So that's a way you could kind of hurt them on that end.
One of the things that I think a lot of people speculated when coming into the season was Boston's bench was not that strong. Had a great starting 5, but they did kind of weaken their bench after the trade to go out and get Drew Holiday. The Pacers, their bench has kind of been their strength this year. Do you anticipate that the Pacers bench might have an advantage against Boston, or do you think that they shorten the rotations knowing this is an in-season tournament game?
Yeah, it's a good question. Boston certainly won't shorten their rotation. It's already pretty short as it is. I think you're going to see them play their 8 guys, so it'll probably be maybe 9-ish. I kind of count Cornette and Queta as 1 because they're going to kind of split the backup minutes behind Horford as much as possible. But then it's Pritchard and Hauser. And occasionally, old friend of the Pacers, O'Shea Brissett gets in there. That's more when Joe Mazzulla doesn't like the energy. And he's like, I need somebody who's just going to fly around and do some stuff out there. Every once in a while, Svi Mikhailuk gets out there if they want a little extra shooting. But for the most part, they've stuck with their top 8 guys, and Porzingis will be out. So that elevates Cornette. And then ultimately that will elevate Queta in there some too. Those 2 guys have been playing a decent amount with Porzingis out. So they're not going to shorten. The Pacers, I think you kind of do what you do, right? I get it. It's a quarterfinal game, but unless you're really saying, hey, our goal is to treat this like a playoff game and we really want to make sure we advance, I don't know how much you're shortening the rotation there. It seems like to me most nights they're playing 9-10 guys pretty regularly. The key is there's not like the 9th and 10th guy aren't getting on the floor and it's going to like, oh God, this guy's out there for the next 5 minutes. It seems like everybody more or less kind of holds their own for the most part. So I would assume that they'll probably play their 9-10 man rotation and get after it that way. What you may see the shortening is you may see the minutes come down a little bit for those guys on both sides. And you may see it kind of go more towards starters are playing 38, 39, 40 minutes, which is a little high for a regular season game.
I can't speak to maybe what this in-season tournament has meant for every team, but for the Pacers in specific, it felt like this has been a taste of the playoffs. 3 of the 4 games were extremely highly competitive. One game we played Detroit, a little bit of a different feel to it. But for the Celtics, 9-0 at home. All 4 of their losses have come on the road. This game is actually going to be in Indiana, so it will be on the road. So how do you feel that the Celtics are when they are on the road compared to home? What's different for them?
Yeah, I think they don't get that energy lift from the crowd. I think, sometimes they need that. They tend to be a team that can go, even if they start out, like I would tell Pacers fans, and I know they're probably like, yeah, right, last time it started that way and we ended up losing by like 50. But I think it's you gotta, even if the Celtics start out, up 10, 15 points in the first 6, 7 minutes, they tend to let teams back in games. And that happens more on the road where they'll let teams back into it and sometimes all the way back into it and then they lose. They just have these long lapses and droughts, which is even more pronounced when Porzingis is out there, because with Porzingis, one of the things that we've already seen Joe Mazzulla go to is, hey, just dump it into him inside and we'll figure something out, right? He'll find a shot himself or whatever. When he's not been in there, it turns into Tatum and Brown try to kind of, all right, I'm going to get us out of this, and that doesn't generally always go so well, because then the ball movement stops, the player movement stops, everything kind of dries up. So that's been a problem. More so on the road than at home, and that's something that the Celtics are still, that they're learning to figure out. And I sound like a broken record with this, but I don't know that they're gonna, like, we're pretty deep into the run for a lot of these guys now into their career, and I think this might just be who they are. And the hope was maybe Drew Holiday is the veteran guy, and maybe it'll still happen. It's only been what less than 20 games. Maybe it still comes where he kind of comes and gets the ball and says, everybody just breathe. Like, run our stuff. We don't need to do this by ourselves. We're going to make this happen. Maybe that'll come down the line, but we'll see. The guy who tends to be their settler when everything gets a little sideways is Derek White. He's a guy who will, all right, we need a big play. I'm going to get downhill. I'm going to get to the rim. I'm going to make something happen. Either I'll score, or I'll find a shooter, or I'll hit my pull-up or my floater, or, I'm going to step into a pull-up 3 and those kind of things. So I'm curious to see, because it's still very much a work in progress.
All right, I hate to ask this basic question, but who do you think are the X factors for both teams? If you had to give me one for each team, who would those 2 be?
Yeah, odd as it sounds for the Celtics, I'd say it's Jaylen Brown, because he's an all-star level guy, all NBA level guy, but he's not really played like it this year. So if they're going to win without Porzingis on the road against a good team, they need Jaylen Brown to come with it and have a big game. And what happens more often than not with Jaylen Brown, especially this year, is he'll have these big first quarters. It's funny. We kind of, those of us who cover the Celtics and follow the team closely, a running joke is like first quarter JB would win the MVP, because he's that good in the first quarter. And then he just kind of goes missing. And then it turns into, hey, I'm going to get this. I got it. I'm going to make things happen late in the game. And that gets super messy at times. So they need him to be good for, 40 minutes, that he's out on the floor versus just the first, 10, 12 minutes. So I would say him. On the other side, I would like to see Bruce Brown maybe do a little bit more, especially on the defensive end. That's been a bit of disappointment to me with the Pacers when I watched them. I thought he'd be a little bit better defensively, and it just feels like he's kind of leaned into, all right, we're just going to fly up and down the floor and make a bunch of plays and be, this incredible offensive team. And I know part of what they wanted him for was, hey, you're a great fit with Haliburton and the rest of the guys, because you should be able to be an above average perimeter defender. So I'm curious to see, one, I'm curious to see who does he guard? And then 2, how does he go about that matchup? So I'd like to see him step up and be a little bit more, because if Haliburton plays, I think everybody else, you kind of know what you're going to get out of him. Brown seems to be the one who kind of comes and goes game by game, especially on the defensive end.
Staying on that defensive end point, I mean, I think when all Pacer fans look at how poor this team has played defensively, they immediately then turn to Bruce Brown and say, I thought you were, supposed to be the guy to fix this. And it's a lot for one man to really be able to solve. But my last question for you is, this Pacers team is scoring at a historic rate. They are really an unbelievable offensive team, and they are a dreaded defensive team right now. Do you feel this could be even sustainable to be a playoff team, or is it one of those where, hey, if you don't fix this, defensive side of things out, I mean, you're not going to make the play-in or the playoffs, because right now it really is that bad. I mean, last time we played Boston, 150 plus points led up. The Pacers have done that quite a few times this year.
Yeah, it's hard to be a real playoff team, meaning you make it through the play-in and then into the actual playoffs if you're bottom like 25 defense. So you got to try to get up to like 18 or 19. Even then, that's not great, right? But at least that's something. You're not then handing back, 75% of the points you score, and that's probably even way too low there. It's like 90% of the points you score, and it's going to be hard. It's just going to be hard to beat teams constantly outscoring them, because again, I talked about it early, other teams will get caught up in it, but other teams can score too, right? Even some of the worst teams can still score points. It what really does, and I'm not Mr. Defense wins championships. I'm not my dad. I'm not quite that old. But it is, you have to play some, right? If you don't play some defense, you're really gonna struggle. So I want to see them, play a little bit better, because I think some of it is also schematic. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't be funneling a little bit more to Miles Turner and letting him clean things up for the perimeter guys. The problem is the perimeter guys, it just seems like, other than Brown, and that comes and goes, and McConnell, nobody really just sits down in a stance, gets in front of a guy, and really locks in. It's almost like defense is something we have to do for the next 20 seconds until we can be on offense again. And that's been a little bit too much of a problem. I just worry about the Pacers getting into games, because we see it in the play-in and obviously in the playoffs. Even the teams that play super fast, everything slows down in those spots. Mostly it's the coaches slow them down, because we got to value the possessions more. We really need to take care of the ball. And then the opponent will play slower too. So it's just a little harder to have those games with over 100 shooting possessions, which is where Indiana wants to play seemingly when you get to the postseason. So I think they have the ability. And if not, they have the ability to maybe go get a guy or two on the trade market and go, get somebody that can kind of set things up a little bit better for them on that end, because they could sacrifice a little bit of offense and not really kill what makes them special as a team. And that's the one thing I always say with teams is, you can't try to fix what ails you by hurting what makes you special, because if you do that, then where are you going to fix it by so much that it offsets it fully, what makes you special? So that's just something that I think about a lot with the Pacers, is they could sacrifice an offensive player to go get a defensive player and still be a very, very good offensive team, if not, otherworldly, historically good offensively.
Yeah, great points, Keith. I mean, this team is one of the worst at ball watching. Every time you watch them, it seems like some guys just getting caught watching the ball and not playing defense, and it's those little attention to detail things that really stick out when you really break down film. But looking at ESPN right now, they're giving the Celtics a 61.2% chance to win this game. As we wrap this up, who do you think wins this game? The Pacers are, though, I should put this out there, 4-0. They're undefeated when wearing their City Edition uniforms, which they'll be wearing in the in-season tournament game at home. So, I don't think the ESPN's factoring that part of it in.
And you give the a little 2-point maybe bonus for the glaring court that'll take a minute to adjust to as well.
The peacock blue, right?
So yeah, that's some of these in-season tournament, and the Celtics one included, they were kind of misses. I think some of these were a little overdone. It's hard to know, right? Because I think what we're gonna find out now is, how much do these 8 teams care? Right? Like, do they really care? If they fall down 15 in the third quarter, are they going to fight back? Or are they going to say, forget it. Let's kind of go. I think one of the motivations for Boston may be, hey, let's try to avoid a game where having to go against Milwaukee or New York, not by our choosing in that second game there, meaning not the semifinal, but kind of the game that gets slotted in, I guess. I want to call it a makeup game, but that's not really what it is. It's just a game that'll get scheduled. So that could be part of it. I'll go with Boston just because I trust Tatum to get him there. I trust guys like Derek White to make enough plays. But Porzingis being out, that's a pretty good equalizer. And I got to believe the Pacers are going to be let's just say they better be a lot more focused after allowing 155 points. Last time, I'm pretty sure these last couple of days without games, that's probably been Rick Carlisle's over and over and over again drilling these guys with we cannot have some of the ridiculous breakdowns we had in that game and some of the really low effort plays. So I think they'll come out better. I think it's going to be a fun game. I just think, I'll trust Boston a little bit more, especially if it gets into a shootout.
That's fair. I mean, look, Boston, you would expect them, regardless of the seeding, to be able to handle Indiana. But like you said, no Porzingis at this point. The Pacers rested Haliburton recently, I would imagine, for this game. He's dealing with an upper respiratory issue. And the Pacers want to make some noise. I'm not thrilled that our 2 nationally televised games are both against Boston this year. But it is what it is. This is the way to really get fans involved and expose them to the Indiana Pacers on a more national level. But Alex, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap things up with Keith?
No, I think Keith pretty much covered it all. I think it's going to be an interesting game, and I think the Peacock Blue, though, Keith, you are hating on it a little bit. It does look bad on TV. It's a lot better in person.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in person, obviously.
I won't lie. It does look bad on TV. But I actually like it. I'm a fan. I don't know why, but it does make it feel more important for whatever reason.
Different.
Those do pop. They all of the courts across the league popped, and you instantly. I have a lot of friends of mine who were, they're casual fans, and they were like, oh, hey, it must be one of these tournament nights, which that's what the goal was, right? When you're flipping through the channels or you're out at the bar and the game comes on, you see the court, you're like, oh, it's one of those tournament nights. So that was the goal of it. And, I think all around the in-season tournament, there's tweaks and adjustments the league will make, obviously, but I think it was a big success. These games were generally played far more competitively. And that final night, with everybody kind of gunning for point differentials, and even though a lot of those games were blowouts, it was a lot of fun, watching those games. And now I need a Premier League style live table that updates, based off of every time something happens. I know the easier done in soccer than in basketball, but yeah, I think it's going to be fun. And to that last point, I would say the Pacers are the exact kind of team the in-season tournament is really made for, right? Make a real run at this thing, try to get out there. And I'll say too, Facci, I'm going to guess they get a couple more nationally televised games before all is said and done. I think there's a chance we see them bump a couple teams. And I'm not talking NBA TV games because that's silly. I don't know. But I think we'll get into the late season and it'll be like, hey, the Pacers are good. They're contending for the postseason and they play a really fun style. Let's get them on in that 7:00 hour, 7:30 hour, and we'll bump one of these other awful, terrible teams out of there. At least that's my hope, because I've yet to find the person, even casual fans, that have seen a Pacer game and not come away saying, boy, that was fun. They're a fun team to watch. So hopefully everybody will get that chance soon.
I love it. I agree, and I hope for it. I saw a great tweet a while ago that basically said my favorite League Pass team is the Pacers. Second favorite is who's playing the Pacers, because it's going to be a shootout. It's going to be an entertaining game, and I think the casual basketball fan is going to be very engaged in that game. But what do you got, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can let Keith only give his prediction. I think we need to give ours too, Facci, before we wrap this up. So, Facci, give me your prediction, and I'll be the final prediction giver for this game.
My prediction is that the Pacers win. It's a high-scoring game, but I think that this game is going to mean a lot to the Pacers. The way that they came out and played, Cleveland, Philly, and Milwaukee in the in-season tournament, you could feel that they really wanted that extra national televised game. That's what they got over here. I don't think they're ready to give that up. So I'm going Indiana Pacers in an upset.
Man, you put me on the spot to be the tiebreaker guy. This is the worst. I want to say, my head says Celtics and my heart says Pacers. So they are undefeated, so I'll just ride the streak out. They're 4-0 in those jerseys, like I mentioned, so why not just keep it going? If Aaron Nesmith scores in double figures, Facci, that'll make him 7-0 when he does score in double figures. So we're just putting out all the good stats here. But, yeah, I'll ride with the Pacers just because they're at home, and I think this game might mean a little bit more to them than Boston. Like Keith, you mentioned, if the team's down by 15 in the third quarter, will they care? I think the Pacers will definitely care. This is a team that's hungry to get any kind of playoff experience. So this to me is a perfect prove it moment for them. I just hope the moment doesn't get too big for them and they come out and lay an egg on national TV, which is also a big fear of mine.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game. I think no matter what, I think the crowd's going to be into it and they'll be rocking, and it'll be a fun one to watch them kind of go at it this way. I think I love that quote about second favorite team and all that. Like I need Pacers versus Wizards, because I think there's a chance we could break the all-time scoring record in that one at some point. Like we just need to see it happen. Focused, healthy Pacers team goes in there and drops like 190 or something on the Wizards, and in regulation too. So we'll see.
No
yeah, guys, I'm excited, man. It should be fun. I'm really excited. That's these two teams going head to head in this first one.
Awesome. Hey, Keith, as we sign off, tell everybody where they could find you on social media and some of the awesome stuff that you're putting out.
Yeah, you can find me at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days. So you find me over there. You can find my written work primarily on Spotrac.com. We've got a lot of stuff coming right now. We're in the middle of running a series that explains how expansion works, because I think we all know that's coming to the league. So we got the first piece up about that. I wrote a piece, your division brethren, breaking up the Bulls, and like my kind of idea of like how it was a look back, like how did we get here? What happened and what needs to happen going forward? And then we'll have, obviously, trade season starts in like 2 weeks. As a lot of the guys who signed over the summer can be dealt. So we'll have a lot of trade related pieces coming up on Spotrac as well. And then you can find my show, NBA Front Office Show, that I do with Trevor Lane, Monday through Fridays over on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts, NBA Front Office Show.
Keith, we really appreciate you coming on. Always one of our favorite reoccurring guests. We look forward to having you back on maybe later in the season.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.